right, 1 Samuel 12, let's call this one The Pivot, maybe subtitle it Saul Under Pressure versus Saul Under Privilege. First of all, The Pivot, because probably my favorite podcast, or at least one of my favorite podcasts right now, I've mentioned before, it's called The Pivot. The interesting thing about that show is it is a derivative of a previously successful podcast of a number of former football players who came together to give a genuine account of what it was like for them in life after football, both as kind of elder statesmen commenting on the game as it's played today and as recent retirees, what life after football can look like successfully for those who are trying to decide what's next after their primary thing has gone away. But after that original podcast became successful, The Pivot grew out of a split in the group, because after success sunk in, some things began to be exposed in the character of that particular team. Going back to something we've mentioned before, the ways in which success can both expose the character, the true deep character of individuals, teams, and organizations. And that's exactly what we are seeing in this chapter 12, after Saul, having been anointed prince, having overcome his initial naysayers, is now going to see that same transition in life. And as an individual, a king in Israel is going to have to deal with the turmoil that comes with success, or the challenges that come with success. Challenges that, God willing, all of us will have to face. But as we've said before, I often hate the difficult times that God brings me through. But it's chapters like this that make it obvious as to why those hard times are so important. Because if God answers our prayers to be blessed, then God willing, we will be prepared to handle success without squandering our opportunities. And Saul is a cautionary tale, because after we saw him at his best, Spirit of God rushing on him, provoking him at his best to speak deep truths about the future, then likewise provoking him to anger, not just to anger, but to action against unjust treatment or injustice against his countrymen at the hands of the Ammonites, but being able to pump the brakes on his anger, showing mercy to those who had wronged him when he was first anointed king. We're now going to see Saul shift, and after being blessed to have pressure expose some high points in his character, we're now going to see what Saul looks like under privilege, understanding that Saul was a privileged kid, but there are certain levels of privilege that we will be able to endure, but then there are extreme levels of privilege that can further expose the deeper parts of our character. And that is essentially where we are here in chapter 12, as we begin to enter the next phase of history for both Israel and Saul. We're going to see in the next few chapters how Saul is going to reject God, and likewise God is going to reject Saul, which is why we often say God's best to us as we go forward in him, God willing, making the most of those times when God brings us difficulty, so that, as we've said before, God can not only give us new opportunities, but he can give us new opportunities that come along with longevity, so that we're not simply having encounters with success,